I think that's the guys. And are there any girls here today? No? Yeah, you guys have woken up to learn about Fuse and creating beautiful apps. It's nice to see you guys. So, how many of you guys have used XAML before? Yeah, that's probably why you're here, because it's in the title. And what about JavaScript? Yeah, most as well. That's good. So, and how many wants to create beautiful apps using these languages? So I'll try to inspire you today and see what we can do with this new framework called Fuse. Have any of you heard of Fuse or used it before? Yeah, one guy over there. Yeah. So yeah, I'll just start with a little background of why I came to choose, well, work with Fuse as technology the past 5 months. So my name is Veland Aas, as you probably know, and this is who I am. This is sort of the time I spend, is a relative point to it. I'm programming fun stuff a lot. I'm programming some boring stuff now and then. I do some walking, driving my car. I'm super happy at times, but I'm mostly balanced, I would say. Yeah, I get angry, clean the house, do several things. I'm definitely a family guy. So now you know a little bit about my personality. But what I think is very important here is not these things, but more about how do I, do I mostly, the things I do mostly routine, or is it about exploring stuff in general? So I would say that 30% of the time I do routine stuff, and I try to, in every daily thing, I try to do exploring new stuff. If I go to work, I'd maybe take a new route just to explore something new. So this is part of the reason why I'm diving into Fuse. So who are you guys? Who's exploring 70% of the time of you guys? That's good. Yeah, I like it. So maybe 1/3. So who's more 50-50, balanced? Okay. And who's 70% routine? And 30% maybe less. Yeah, a couple of guys here. So I have a couple of things for you guys. I have a compass for you and a compass for you, so you can go explore a bit more. Okay, so this is what I met in January. When you're told by the project stakeholders that it's decided that you must build the mobile app, but you have to use one specific and fantastic new mobile framework that solves cross-platform forever. Okay. Because it saves you from doing any work, and the stakeholder can generate it from Photoshop, basically. That's sort of the agenda here. And the stakeholder have attended the conference, seen slides, showcases, and more, and is totally convinced this is the right thing. So I guess we've all been there, that we have some people around us that decide the framework. But how do you react to this? And that's pretty core to how you tackle new technology, I think. Are you like this? I guess everyone is like this at some point. Or am I like this? Or are you like this? Super excited, new thing. So I'm probably a mix of these three things, I guess, but I try to be mostly like this. When I get a new technology, I get a new opportunity to explore a new framework. And that's also probably the reason why I've founded this new company in January 1st. I want to build mobile apps. It can be frustrating, but I look at it as an exploration trip and taking some chances. And I would say it's definitely like this in mobile technology today. We have all these choices, all these frameworks. Some are more famous than others. Fuse is pretty new in this group. Most of us know Xamarin. We have the native way of building things. Yeah, how many here prefer to work with native, like Swift, Objective-C, Java? One guy over there. Who's Xamarin people here? One, two, all right. And how about web-based framework, HTML5? Okay, so most of you guys are on the HTML5 bits. So that's interesting. So very often when we talk about, well, when I'm thinking of which mobile framework should I choose for this job? As I mentioned, you have the stakeholders in the project. You have your previous experience in the team. If you come from a web developer background, you would usually choose. Well, you would think as a web developer when you're approaching mobile, and HTML5 it's much closer to you in many ways. Me myself, I've been working for years with .NET and Microsoft, so it was natural to explore the mobile platforms from Xamarin, and I also been developing a lot of JavaScript web applications. So it's so the combination of looking at Fuse now is very interesting because you get to reuse your Xamarin experience and your VPF and Silverlight and all these Microsoft technologies. It's very influenced by that and combine it with JavaScript. So I try to rate 3 frameworks based on these, well, based on tooling, based on how big the business logic is in the app. That will vary from app to app. Some apps have tons of business logic. You might even, well, you might don't realize it before you begin the project, but usually it grows quite large. Well, some projects have a need for custom design and animations. If sometimes you want to lean on the iOS framework or the Android framework, and you just want the look and feel of the OS. You want to reuse the navigation system. You want to use the toggle button for iOS, and pretty much lean on UI kits and material design. And that's fine. But in other projects, you want the same consistent feeling throughout the application on both platforms, and you really want to move more to gaming, have custom animations, and create that total user experience by yourself. And some frameworks make this quite easy, and some frameworks make it quite hard. Usually you want to access some native controls and features as well. That's like geolocation, using the camera, creating a custom experience maybe with the camera. Yeah, all these different things the mobile can do actually. And you basically need to access the Android API and the iOS API directly to be able to do that. And you have a community full of third-party components. You have UI components, and you have more like integration components. Maybe you want to do analytics with Google Analytics or something else. And the way you can integrate with this, it varies a lot from framework to framework. So I'm going to use this is my subjective score on these frameworks based on my experience. I can challenge you guys to maybe get an HTML5 rating in here. We'll see. So this is from my experience how Xamarin is lining up to this. I find Xamarin very strong on the business logic side because you have C#. You can use the PCLs. You can reuse the code. So that's one of the strong things that you bring into a project in that perspective. And the tooling is quite good. It's maturing, and it's been around for years. On custom designs, you can choose Xamarin Forms, but you can also choose to go with, well, if you don't choose Xamarin Forms, everything gets more complicated with Xamarin. So But if we compare this to building native apps, then the reason why I rate it lower is because you have to build the business logic twice. You have to do it in Java, and you have to do it in Objective-C. So immediately you get less productive, and you have to maintain 2 code bases from the business logic side. And doing custom designs, you also have to do it twice on totally different platforms. And if I put Fuse in here, it's quite different. It's like top score on custom designs and animation. And that's a different take on it. So that means that this is, well, the company making Fuse, this is their goal, to be able to, well, enable the mobile apps to have custom designs and animation with superb quality, with 60 frames per second, making it easy, declarative. And I'll show you guys some animations today and how to build it. And it's kind of fun. So, but on the other side, it hasn't matured a lot yet. It was released in 1.0 2 weeks ago. So you can do integration with third-party components, and you can do native controls and features, but you have to code a lot of it yourself. The community hasn't grown large yet, and the tooling is also more about, well, you have to use Sublime or Atom, and those are the official plugins in those text editor tools, really. You have, yeah, so you basically have those tools at hand, and you use the terminal, and you have to do manual logging in many ways and build all this wiring yourself behind the scenes. So let's see. Yeah. And what framework will you choose is based on what your app will actually do. So I would say that Fuse is lined up on the left side, probably, between gaming and a regular app somewhere. Over on the right side, doing a lot of peripheral equipment connected to the phone, using the USB port, doing all this hardware stuff, Bluetooth, that kind of thing. I wouldn't say it's mature enough to do that as well, but it eventually will be. We'll see. So what about design? So this is a snapshot from well, it's a video from Fuse's own webpage on what Fuse can be used to build. And you see these experiences that are totally customized, and it's not classic iOS or classic Android you see here. But it's very cool experiences. And Fuse is based on, well, they use OpenGL to render this, to have the performance. So performance is key with Fuse. You can do infinite scrolling with thousands of elements. It's very optimized for, well, here we do a pinch and zoom. And all the time you have 60 frames per second. So these are just a few examples that you can see. They built this, yeah, here we go. We got some parallax effect. And you can just imagine doing this on native platform, on Android, iOS. It would be quite hard to get the same experience on both platforms. And that's the last thing, I think. It's a tickets system, and you have all these small, tiny effects that's going on. And you have to decide if you should go cross-platform. And these days, it's natural to think that way. So what is Fuse? Well, Fuse is made by Fuse Tools here in Norway. And it's right up the street here, the company. And it's now free and open source. You can download the bits and see what's going on. It's using OpenGL to generate the UI, and they render most of the code down to C++. And it's easy to install. So you can start with this like in 2 minutes. So compared to many other frameworks, it's very fast to get started. You pretty much click the download button and you run the installer, and then you're set. Well, one of the key things with Fuse is you can do live preview on multiple devices at the same time. So if I connect my Android phone and the iOS tablets, and I use the Mac at the same time, or the PC, you can do it on PC and Mac, they will all show the same view. So they have two modes. If you choose to build it, it's more like you do a regular build of applications. It will render it so you can open it in Xcode, and you can deploy it to the device, and you will have the 60 frames per second and fully optimized app. That's one way to do it. The live preview is different, and this is where JavaScript comes in, because they do reloading, or what they call refi, they call it. So they build in the background and they refresh it using JavaScript. So the performance is a bit degraded, but you will be able to code and see what's happening at the same time. And it's one-to-one with design. So I'll show you guys afterwards how this works. We'll dive into the preview and make a small app. Yeah. These are some of the things you can do with Fuse. All right, so I'm still excited. So we can do fun things like this. All right, so this is the stack. Just take it very shortly. You have the JavaScript on top, you have UX, and UX is pretty similar to XAML. And you have Uno. Have you guys ever heard of Uno? You heard of Uno? That's pretty good. It's C#'s cousin, actually. It's pretty similar to C#. I'm not sure why they don't use C#, because it's very similar. But it probably has to do with rendering down to C++, and then running on OpenGL and the native bits. And I would just like to show you guys the Fuse docs as well, because it's very well documented to be such a young framework. So you have all, well, if I want to see what the panel is doing, I can go in here and click, and you will, if you guys have seen XAML before, oh, you don't see it. Oh, thanks. Let's do this. You see it now? Yeah. So if you go to the Fuse webpage, you can just hit docs, and then you pretty much get started. The installation is, as I said, just download the bits, just install it, and then me personally, I went through this tutorial, which will give you a lot of best practices, which I would recommend. And then you can dive into all these various elements, and like a panel, and you can see some samples on what the panel can do. You can put some margin on it, padding, colors, and you have all the properties. So it's very well documented to be such a young framework. Let me see. Yeah, so JavaScript. From my experience, it's super flexible. It's functional. You can do JSON work very easily. You can just dot into the JSON. You can do all sorts of things to manipulate it. You have the require to create modules from JavaScript. That's built in to Fuse. And I want to keep the JavaScript simple, so you don't have any, like you don't have Angular or React inside it. So you don't, well, usually you don't use Node Packet Manager to fetch all these dependencies. You just really want to keep it simple with Fuse, because it's already very modular and easy to create components. And you get the hot reloads that I mentioned. But then you also have I'll show you some of, well, how the JavaScript can look like in code. I have a very huge project here that I'll use as a basis to show you guys. Let's see if we dive into this one, and we'll go to this. This can be a JavaScript behind the scenes. Oh, it's still there. Yeah. This can be how JavaScript can look like in a huge file. So it can be, this is sort of this is sort of the bad side with JavaScript, I would say. Because you have all this required modules, but you need to do so much stuff in these components that you're still stuck with the text editor, and as you scroll down, you can see, wow, there's a lot of JavaScript going on here, and promises, and yeah. So since it's not that mature, the test framework is lacking. It's difficult to get control of. At the same time, if you keep it in a small and consistent package, like 2-3 pages that doing really good stuff, good animations, you can have small, very consistent code on it. So this is what the JavaScript looks like here. And XAML, let me see. Yeah. So XAML, well, what you want to do with Fuse is declare most of it this not in JavaScript, but declare it in UX, which is comparable to XAML. So you really want to create the grids and rectangles and panels, and even animations should be declared inside UX. So instead of coding animations in JavaScript, you do it here. And then if you want to bring in some external components, you use Uno, which is similar to C#. So you recognize the syntax, and this is the way you include libraries from Java, and you include libraries from Objective-C. Yeah, but as you see, it's still a bit complex to do this. So yeah, so if you want to get the SDK version from iOS or from Java, you create these brackets with the @ in front of it, and you can then do the native call directly and return that value to JavaScript all the way up. So I was thinking we should just build something in Fuse to see how it works. We have a blank Fuse application here. It's just white. I'll switch to that app. So this is basically the app when you start a project. You just create a folder. You have this is the only file I need to just get the Fuse project to recognize it as a Fuse application. And you will add this eventually. You can put in the version number and things that go into the Android manifest file, and all of that comes in here eventually. This is basically the app. So what I do here now is I go to my terminal. I can write Fuse preview. And then I'm just sitting in the folder where this code is, and we'll see if Fuse is firing. There it is. So that's the basic preview. This is the free version that you see on the right-hand side. There's also a professional version that will give you more like drag and drop things you can explore a bit more. But I've mostly been working with this, and it's working quite nicely. So if we go into the app here now, I'll just realign this a bit. And there's Slack fires, okay. I'll just start by making a rectangle. Let's see. And I'll put a color on it. It can be red. And there you go, it's red. So it's just filling the full screen. So default in Fuse is it's stretching to the boundaries by default. Okay, so that's fine. We have a rectangle. Let me see if we can just make this a bit smaller. Maybe it should be more like this. Okay, 60, 60. Probably typed something wrong here. There we go. 60, 60. Okay. And I would like some more rectangles. So let's have a stack panel like this, and then we have a fun thing that I usually do in code behind the scenes. I can create something called an each in UX. And in this, I can just say count 4, and I get 4 rectangles. And I can do item spacing, 18. Item spacing, let me see, it's not on the each, it's on the stack panel. And say 18, okay, so we spread it a little bit, looks nice. And then I would like to align it the other way, and so I can put orientation on it. Let me see, horizontal. So what I'm using here is Atom to code. And there is, I'll just show you that quickly, because I get some IntelliSense, if we can call it that. But there's a package here called Fuse. It will give you some syntax help here. Orientation. So that's why horizontal is popping up. So there we go. And I think this is what you will recognize as a difference between UX and SAML. Because in SAML, I would have to say horizontal alignment and vertical alignment. I would have to say center and top in two different things. Here I can say center left, center right, or just center. So they kind of compressed it to make it a bit easier well, you will write less properties. So I just center it. It will still, well, now it's centering vertically and horizontally. Yeah, so we got some red dots here. So what should we do with that? We can make these things a bit more exciting. So I can open this bracket up. Let me see. And we can create a linear gradient. So just type that in here. And we can have a gradient stop. And with offset 0. With color. Do you have any color you want in this application? Do you have a hex value for me? Just make one and see if it works. S is difficult to have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, thank you. There we go. Okay, and we make the. Ah, that's right. You guys are awake. Oh, it's purple. So we have to make this one a bit different. Maybe. Should it work? What? Ah, that's true. Gradient. Well, no, it's gradient stop. Okay, just make it gray. Oh, it's there, which was just very similar. Yeah, so we got something there. Cool. And then I would like to add a text on top of it. So I'll just make a panel around it. A panel is just a simple thing. It will just stack things on top of each other. So if I make a text box here, I can say value, hello. Like this. Oh, it says hello. It's a bit dark, so I just set color white. Yeah, there we go. And I also like to align this in the center of this box, like this. So now we have 4 gradient boxes. That's doing nothing, but it says hello. Okay, so we should do something a bit more fun with these boxes. So what I'm thinking is, I would like to have an area up here where I can animate this stuff. So if I click a box, it could animate up here, it could expand, maybe it can do something with the corner radius, maybe it can become a circle instead of a square. That would be kind of nice. So we try that. So I'll create a panel up here and give it a name. I can call it Superbox Large. Okay, so it should be a large box up here at some point. I'll give it a width. Could be 100. These are relative. This is a relative size, so it's not pixels. It will adapt to the screen and density you have, so it looks similar on all the various screens. So you can say 150 there as well. So we have a square box that's doing nothing. And we just align it to the top center. So we can see where it is right now. Let's see. It's there. OK. And then we put some margin on it just to, oops, just to have it a bit further down. OK. So we want this one inside this one. How do you do that? All right. So this box right here should have a width of, well, it should basically, I should have some kind of container around this box, because if I just move this box up here, this one will, well, the stack here will collapse a bit, because then you actually move one of the 4 elements away from that stack panel. It will change. So I create this placeholder around it, so I can remove it without it losing its place in the original spots. It's an animation technique that you can use for that. So just make a, I don't need a name on that, but I'll just create the same width on this wrapping panel from the small boxes. So it's 60, 60. So now it has a panel around it, and the rectangle is in there. So I'm thinking of, well, I changed that. This is the one I want to move. So this is my fancy box, I can call it. I'll make a panel around this. This is sort of the way you work with Fuse. You start just building everything in one file, and you explore, you sit with the previewer, maybe you put it on device eventually, and you just figure it out. And the previewer is great in this way, because you can sit and explore the technology and all these various components without building and waiting and see how it looks on the device like 3 minutes afterwards. So I'll just experiment with this. I'll put the width here. 60, height 60. OK, it's still there. If I do something wrong, it disappears. So I know it's good. OK, so to do this animation then, we need to have a selection API. So I'll just to make sure I have the code in place here, I'll show you. It's pretty similar. I just do as the chefs do. Oops. No, I won't. Let's see. OK. So you can see it immediately changed. We have the same boxes. We have the super box large. We have the same each. We just have different colors. What I added now is a JavaScript behind. That's the only change here. So I really want the boxes to be read from this one instead. So I give it every box an ID, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I create something called Observables. So I require from the Fuse.js library Observable Library. And Observables are extremely powerful in Fuse. You have a full API. You can put a list in it, or you can just put a Boolean, a string, an integer, and you can listen to events on it. So you can use JavaScript functions like mapping if you have a text, and you change that text in real time. You can then, inside a map function, you can act on it. You can do something. You can set a Boolean somewhere else, and you can have all these dependencies together through the Observable API. So we can imagine, well, right now I just coded this basic JSON right in this file, inline, but you can also fetch it from a backend or your API. Doesn't matter where it comes from. And then you just pipe it into the observable that I declared right here. So I can declare a variable boxes equals observable to enable it, and then by saying replace all, I just make sure that every time I set this list, it will replace all the existing elements with this list or a new list. So if you refresh from the backend, I could just use replace all. Or some other function if you want to add it in a different way. And then I can use the JavaScript require system. So I just say module exports, and I export the name boxes with the observable boxes. So then I have a JavaScript file here that I can, instead of having the count here, I can just say items, and I can say boxes, like this. And it still doesn't say anything else, but I still have 4 boxes. So it means I must have done something right. And then I can start to data bind. As you do in XAML, I can data bind the ID and text. So I can start by replacing hello with text, like this. And it says hello 1, 2, 3, and 4 inside the box, as in the JavaScript. And now we can start, because I now have a different data context for every box, I can now start to animate it and do something with it. So what you see in this file is I've added something called selection. And this is the Fuse selection API, which is pretty well documented as well. But what I do here is I say I can select one item at a time. I can select, well, but I don't have to select any. So that's why I set minimum count to 0 and the max count to 1. So if I click on one element, something should happen. If I click on another element, it should be exchanged with the first one, and so on. So with this, I have some events I can hook to. And we can start with this while, and you see all these while things. Fuse have built a lot of the eventing and the interaction around this while patterns. So if I have something said while true, I can bind it to a boolean, like true, false. And if I put something inside while true, I can show it and remove it based on that value. So everything that's declared inside while true will be hidden or enabled based on that. And you have busy, you have floats, if a counter is something, if it's empty, if a list is empty, you have all these different things. So now I use while selected. So if the fancy box is selected, I will do something with it. And I'll make a click event on this. And I see the time is flying, so I just make a small shortcut on this as well. Let me see. All right. So based on that, we have the selectable API. I now bind the ID to the selectable API. We're still inside the fancy box. So if you look at the JavaScript, we have the ID 1, 2, 3. There's something to hook on every box. On the clicked event, I just use something called toggle selection, that will communicate automatically with this selectable. And the selection API, which is up here, that defines how many you can select at a time. And then we add on some animation. So, as I said, we have the while true, we have the while selected, and then we can do something quite cool. We can change the layout master of the fancy box. So the fancy box is still, well, let's see if we can turn this on in the Fuse preview. The fancy box is, there should be a blue line around it. Okay, should be able to click it here as well. And you can see from, yeah, well, it's not that visible, but now it's selected all these 4 boxes in the preview, so you can see where you are. So we still have the superbox large up here, but it's without color. It's 150 wide, so let's try to click it and see what happens. Well, it animates, and it changes corner radius. And the corner radius is, well, we do 2 things with animations here. While selected, we set the layout master to the superbox large, which is the placeholder up top. right there. And we bring it to front. It's just a general thing you can do on all elements in Fuse. You can bring it to front, and then we'll stack on the top layer in the same context. And we changed the superbox, corner radius, and superbox is, I just named the rectangle itself. So a rectangle can have a corner radius, so you can make the rectangle a circle. So it's a nice trick. So we changed the corner radius of the rectangle to 75, because the box up there is 150. It will look like a circle. And the duration is 0.3, and the duration I set to 0.3 on all of these. And when you select it and you change the layout master, you can add something called the layout animation on the fancy box itself, because this will trigger when you change the layout. And this is, you get used to this syntax and what it does. This was one of the hard things in the beginning, but once you try it a few times in the preview, you will just get it under your skin. So you can do move, you can do scale, you can do resize on animation when something happens. So we just changed the container, and based on that, this one will trigger. So I say I will move this element relative to the world position change. And that's kind of the application, the change in the application, where it moves in the whole application, not in this inside the stack panel, not inside this, but like the X and Y coordinates in the whole application. And I will do this with a vector of 1. I can say, well, I will just move it with, yeah, we could try that. I can say, I will move the X by half the relative distance, and I will move the Y with the full relative distance, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so it changed a bit. And I can say I will move it fully, and it goes, you can see it affects the animation. Now it goes directly to the rectangle up on top there. If I say I will move it to X, it goes to, it doesn't change sideways first, so you get this a bit choppy animation. But the combination in X and Y is vector, so if I just say vector 1, it will smoothly go up in a direct line to that box. Yeah, it's pretty smooth. And then I want to resize it, and I do that with vector 1 as well, because I want it to resize in a consistent way on both width and height in combination, relative to the actual size change between those two boxes. And I can put some easing on it as well, so I get this quadratic in and out. It will do some speeding and slowing at the right time. So that's basically what I did to make this, and I can click it as fast as I want, and you can see, oh, it reverses. It will automatically reverse the animation if you do something else with it. And this is like a huge time saver. You can bypass the backward animation. You can set well, as you see, I set the duration here 0.3. But if I want something else on the back, on the way back, I can delay it in the backwards animation, or I can do duration back, set to different things, so it can be very slowly on the way back. It can be super fast on the way in. So you have all these things you can do. So, yeah, I'll just show you the next step in this. Eventually, this small code, I just made this like super fast yesterday. I probably used 90 minutes to make this stuff and sit and fiddle with it. And I came up with this. It's not super beautiful, so if you guys want to evolve it into something super nice with great color schemes and everything, be free to do so. But what you see here is I put on some more effects on this layout stuff. So I do a half-tone thing. I get tinting and dots on the image behind it when I click it. And I change the corner radius as before. I can also change the, well, I can put a layer on top that I can use a slider. And this slider is actually native. So if I run this on the iOS, I will get the native iOS slider here. So there are capabilities to do this and blend and mix these things together. So how did I make this halftone? Let me see. That's the wrong project. Halftone is simply adding an image. I just put it on the app level. I could put it on the panel itself, but this will automatically stretch to the full size of the screen. And since it's declared below the stack panel with the boxes and the slider, it will appear behind it, just as in a normal stack. And these are built-in functions in Fuse. You can have halftones, you can use desaturate, you can use blur if you want on any layer in the application. You can just imagine the effects you can create on even these boxes. I can set some properties like smoothness and tint and all these things that halftone can provide. And the image is just a local image, or I can load it from a URL if I want. And the colors are now coming from the JSON, so I'm binding this. And I created separate classes of my superbox, which is the rectangle, and the wrapper with animation in it. So how do you create a component from it? Well, you actually just create a new file. You name it superbox, if that's the name of my rectangle, superbox.ux, and Fuse will automatically find that folder, compile it, and include it in your project. So everything you have to do is, instead of declaring it as a UX name, you declare it with a UX class. And that's it. You then have a new class, you have a new component you can use. So the way you use that component afterwards is like this. You get a new declarative thing you can use. So my fancy box class, I can just use it like this. I can feed it with properties that I declare. So in my superbox, I've declared two properties, and you do it like this. I have a float 4 that is basically a hex value, and I have a float 4 here, which is an end color. So that enables me to put it on. Let me see. Yeah, I don't use it there actually, but I can also create dependencies because my fancy box now have dependencies to this container outside, right? So every element here is a fancy box. It has this width and height, but it needs to communicate with the super box large to do this relative scaling, right? So what I do is I pass in this panel, which is the placeholder, to every fancy box through this variable. And inside fancy box, I can just declare the same panel. But instead of saying UX name or something else, because then I get a new element, I can say UX dependency. So then I just pass the pointer inside the component, and I can do the main animations inside the components based on the click. So this is the click event, and we still have the same, haven't done anything with the naming here. It's the same. So just copy it from my big file and break it into small components as I go. So that is just a very small showcase on how you can explore Fuse from that perspective. And I'll just fire up a different project here as well, just to see something a bit more fancy. So just navigate with terminal. We can go to the, I'll show you guys, yeah, a very cool switch here that someone made. So just fire Fuse preview. I actually got a new previewer there. Okay, that's good. So it's compiling the Uno code. So everything is ready. Build complete, loading, and there we go. So this is just a custom switch, basically doing the same stuff, but it's using a swipe gesture instead of just a click gesture. But it's doing animation the same way. It looks a bit more fancy though. So you have a combination of duration, delays, and you can even swipe it then, like slowly, like this. So it's quite cool. And if you move this code that you make, you can just start with a simple app, and you move this into its own file. You can create a file called toggleswitchbutton.ux, and you just give it a UX class on top. Then you can reuse it in every Fuse application you have on every page, and multiply it by 1,000 times if you want. And then you can hit it with data context and observable, and you can turn things off and on based on that. So that's quite cool. Show you one more, which is a bit more complete application concept. The wheel navigation, sure, we can fire up that. And I didn't mention that, but to be able to publish this to the App Store, all you have to do is use Fuse build, and then you say configuration release, and it builds your APK package or your IPA package for iOS and Android, and you can upload that to the store. So it's pretty easy. This is kind of cool. You can create this experience. It's tab control. And this is actually doable in Fuse. I sit in a project now for the last 5 months where we build these experiences. And I've never done this before. Well, not in this way. I've built a lot of UI in the past years, but Fuse makes it much more simple and manageable, using my XAML background and using the JavaScript background in the ways you see. You just build on it, create components all the time, and you could end up with something like this. I'll show you one more. Let me see. We can have the dynamic tab bar. Sure. Fuse preview. And it's easy to, I can flip the, just flip the aspect here. I can choose devices here because it's, let's see the iPad Retina. Like this, you can scale it, you can test it in various sizes just in the preview. So it's very fast to just have a feeling of how it looks like and how it scales on various devices. So now this looks like a better application, and you can imagine if you have the JavaScript in the background, you can replace the static content with just a real list from the backend or the API. And then you're pretty much good to go. Yeah. Any questions on this? Does it look fun? Yeah? Yeah, sure.
Regarding you said it was possible to drag and drop something in the professional version.
Yeah.
Doesn't this involve rights to like drag and dropping as you're working with relative sizes and everything?
Well, actually, I'll correct myself a little bit. I'll see if I can find the professional version here. It's I'm not. It's not exactly drag and drop. It's more like you see the full visual tree, and you can click on it, and you can sort of explore stuff. I'm not sure if they built the drag and drop yet, but probably they will. Just be able to drag and drop things into the visual tree, but you will then get the layout properties on the right-hand side. You will put in margins and stretch mode and uniform to fill and all these things you have to select from. You'll just have a UI to do it in. Yeah. Yeah. So. From what you've seen then, how will this expedition end? You never know, really, with new mobile frameworks. It could end like this. Hopefully it won't. But it goes end like this. So it's just being open-minded to Fuse. Me personally, I find Fuse fantastic for these small, nifty applications. I can easily deploy it to Android and iOS. I think right now I would probably prefer Fuse doing, if I want to have these custom animations in a 1 or 2 or 3 page application, it's great. Then you have kind of control on your full control on the JavaScript size. You have most of it is declarative, and you can really concentrate in the preview about making it super nice and having all these small animations that makes it stick out from the crowds in the App Store. A lot of it is about that, just making it stick out and creating that wonderful user experience. Yeah, right now I would do it for the small applications, but if it's more corporate, if it's more enterprise, I would probably stick with Xamarin in many cases and just lean on the UI kits, iOS and Android. For some projects, I would definitely just use the native stuff. No matter if you're doing a lot of peripheral equipment, if you want to connect to other systems, if you really want the latest things from Apple. When 3D Touch came, sometimes you don't have that capability for months, maybe even years in some frameworks. And if that's important to you, you should just stick with the native platforms directly as well. So that choice is always there. But for me, it's like this. Hopefully, this whole travel, selecting different frameworks, makes me wiser, and I can still explore and have fun. And Fuse definitely makes it more fun. So that's it. Hope you had a good time. Please come up to me and ask questions, or meet me afterwards. Be happy to show you guys some more.